Hello, my data people. What is up, everybody? So today, what we are going to be going over is the basic functionality of DAX. We are going to go over Power BI and DAX and how to create DAX, what DAX in your model means and how it interacts with each other, and how you can use very basic DAX functions, almost exactly like the Excel functions, so that you can get a very powerful visual placed on the page and a report published with very basic DAX knowledge to just throw stuff on the page. So let me give you a brief overview of what model we're going to be working with. So we're going to be using some sample data for, let's say we're a logistics or like a shipping industry company. So we've got clients that we do orders for or shipments for. That's kind of the data that we're working with here today. So the relationship, very basic, very simple relationships. We just got two out here. So we've got our date table, and again, this is our very standard date table. Again, all of those filters. I've got a video on this of how you can create this date table in a couple of minutes. Go watch that if you want to know. And then our client is a one-way relationship to our orders table. So we've got a fact orders table, which is filtered by our lookup client table. All right, so now that we've got our model understood, let's go ahead and just go through how we can get some of these basic things in calculations on measures and onto the page so that we can get some insightful numbers thrown at us really quickly and easily. So first, what I like to start out with is the way that I like to make sure that I do my Power BI modeling and create any reports is to make sure that it stays very organized, because if you start getting into some advanced models and you start connecting to whole hundreds of different data sources, you can start getting really disorganized if you don't have a good foundation. So I always like to have good practice on going into any fresh model of making sure my stuff is organized. One of the ways I do that, or the way that I do that with my measures, is I create measure groups. So we'll go through, I'll end up creating 3 measure groups throughout this little demo. But first of all, just go through how to create one, and the other two will pop in when we get to those two. So to start out, we're going to go into the Enter Data button. Push Enter Data, and then you're going to get a little table here. I always name these the same thing, just for consistency's sake again, and just to stay organized. So I always name that first group base key measures. So what I put into this base key measure group is, again, just those very basic DAX functions that we're going to go over right now. So like sums, just an average, your basic Excel functions, right? Just those ones that counting rows, a count distinct, just those very basic functions I'll place into this base key measure group. So let's start out with that. Let's go ahead and just do a count of our clients. And the way that DAX does counts is you have to think about all of your measures that you create. You have to think about your model whenever you're creating DAX measures. So what we're going to be doing is there are options for our counts, right? So when we type in count, we have a bunch of different options that we can do. The one that I typically use almost all the time is either count rows, count distinct, and count A is very similar to count distinct, but I just use distinct count instead. So what I use typically almost all the time is count rows, and then sometimes distinct count. But let me go through count rows, the most used one that I use. So if you use count rows, what this is going to do is it is exactly what it says it is. It is counting the rows on the table that you provided. So we want to do a client count, so we're going to simply count the rows on our client table. And then since this is client table is a lookup table, and we're not counting rows on the order table, we're going to get the number of unique clients. Again, since it's a lookup client table based on our model, each row on our client table is unique. So if we count rows on our clients, we will get the number of total clients that we have in our model. So let me go ahead and throw on a page real quick, a visual real quick with our client information and then count of clients. And so if we sort this by high to low, you can see that every client has a 1 because that is a client count. Each client should show a 1. And we have a total of 500 clients in our model. And so going back to our measure group real quick, you can see that I never deleted this column 1. Because if you delete this without creating any measure within the group, you'll delete the whole table, right? So before you delete the column 1 measure that's created by default, make sure you add a measure to the measure group, and then that you can delete column 1. And then you can see this little icon will go from a table to a measure icon. and all measure groups will be at the top. So when we go through this, you can see why I like to organize this way as we go through it. All measure groups will be placed at the top with your data underneath it. All right, so continuing on. So let's say so we've got a count of our clients. Now we want to know how many orders each of these accounts have placed. So let's go with, actually, before we do that, let me show you the difference between count distinct. So if we go to a count of distinct clients, so let's do a distinct count by our, let's say we only have within our data, within the model that you're working with, let's say you only have a fact table, right? So you only have an export with what your clients have ordered. So you want to get how many clients you have on that order table. So another way to do it is instead of counting rows, because if you're counting rows in that order table, you'd be counting how many orders total have been made. What we want to do is distinct count the client ID on the order table. So we're going to get a distinct count of clients who have placed an order. So if we put this on the page, now we can see that this client does not show a 1. So that means that they have not placed an order. So that they are in our client data. They are a client that we have, but we simply haven't worked with them yet. So again, just with a simple count, we can already see, okay, we have clients within our database, we haven't contacted them. Let's go reach out to these guys and work with them, right? So you can quickly already get some insight into your data right there with just a count. Let's also add in our count of orders. Let's say we want to see how many orders each client has placed, right? So again, because our model is set up in a way that works like this, we can count rows on our order table, and now we will have the number of orders each of our clients has placed. And again, if you drop in that distinct count, you can see this client again does not have any orders, so we're not distinct counting them when we distinct count on the order table. It's a nice quick way to kind of validate some of your stuff as well. And again, if you want to just do a quick sort, there you go. This is going to be your most frequently done business with client, right? So you work with these guys the most. Sorted by that, there you go. Your most worked with clients, top to bottom. Already like that, you can find out who you work with the most. On top of the count and count rows, let's go into a quick sum function here. So let's go to the total order cost. And so what this is just going to be, again, just very simple. So we're just going to do a sum, and we're just going to take a sum of a column. What is that column? Shipping cost. So again, it's just going to take this complete sum of the column that we're telling it to sum up. So very, very basic. And once you can see here, the decimals and the parentheses or the commas, they can get pretty out of hand. So what I usually like to do with some of these bigger values is I'll definitely close out those dollars and get it formatted right away, just so that I can make sure it looks nice and pretty on the eyes. So I know what I'm looking at, right? So just format those measures right away when you get them created, so you can just know what you're looking at pretty quickly. So great, so there we go. So we've got our count of our orders, we've got our most frequently ordered client, how much they're paying us. We've got a very basic report already coming together with just some very basic functions. And then one more quick and basic one, we can go with the average order cost as well. Again, just another very basic, just taking an average. So an average function, and then we'll just take that same column, being the cost column on shipping. And so again, we're just going to take the average of that order cost. And now we can see the average cost of a order by client. So across the full data set, we've got an average order cost of $1,268, right? But then per client, we can see that our top client is pretty much right at the average. They're right at the average with their ordering dollars, with how much each order they're spending with us is. And then scrolling through a bit, you can just see kind of there's not too much variance in this data. It is dummy data that we generated, so it's not great on how much variance there is, but you can see that that's just the average order per client there. And all right, so now that we've got those basic ones down, let's go through and do some more advanced ones. Let's go ahead and create another measure group here. We're going to be doing some new stuff. Let's go with time intelligence measures. All right, and then in here, so another very, very powerful measure that we're going to go through here, or function, is date add. So it's a very quick way to kind of move some dates from one month into another, so you can very quickly do date comparison and some growth rates, and just easily show some growth rates over time, throw it on a visual that'll look nice and pretty. So let's go with count of orders LM for last month. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use a combination of some DAX functions here. So what we're doing is we're going to calculate. So when we calculate, this will take two arguments. So it's going to take an expression, sorry, not two, an unlimited number of arguments, but two little groups. We're going to give it an expression, and then we're able to filter that expression by specific things that we provided. So what we're taking our expression on is we want to do a count of orders. So our expression is going to be the one that we originally built. So it's going to be our count of orders expression. And then when you put a comma, you can see that it's going to go into our next one. So what we're doing now is we're filtering. What we're going to want to do here is use the filter function. We're going to filter, and then the filter statement expects a table. So we're going to filter our order table so that our orders, oh, sorry, wrong function here. Instead of using the filter function, what we're going to use here is the date added function. So what this date added function does is, in the calculate statement, after our expression, we're able to filter. So within this filter statement, what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be adding a negative date to our month to move our date back 1 month. So it sounds a bit confusing when I say it, but let me go through it here. So the way that this date added field and the way that this date added function works is its first argument is going to be a date field. The best way to keep everything consistent and so you know what you're doing within your measure so that you don't get lost, dates can be very tricky to work with. So the best way to make sure you know what you're doing is to use your date table's date. And what that means, what date it's going to use within the data is going to be the active relationship for that date table. So again, going back to that model tab that I was on earlier, our active date relationship in our model is to our order date on our fact table. So when I'm date adding on this measure to the date that it's adding to is the open date, is the order date of the order placed, since that's our active relationship. It can get a little confusing, but I think it'll make more sense in just a minute. So hang with me. So then -1, after we specify the date column that we're using, typically our date table's date, we're going to specify the number of intervals. So we're going back, we're -1, going back 1, and then comma, you can specify the interval. So we're going back, number of intervals, 1 month. And then go ahead and close that out. And then in here you can close out the calculate statement. All right, so our error went away. Let me go ahead and reorganize this table a bit here. Let me go with month and year instead, so it's easier to look at. And count of orders each month. Let me delete this. So this is a measure group. Now you can see that it's measure again, following up, measure groups on top. And now we can put our last month in. So again, let's just make sure that we understand what's happening here, right? So we've got our count of orders for this client. So in September, this client made 170 orders. September 2020, that was their order count. October 2020, 422. November 20, so on and so forth, right? So that's how you read this table. Here's the month, here's the client, here's how many orders were made in that month for that client. And then what we're doing with our LM measure is we're simply moving that last month value up into a month that is current so that we can then analyze and compare the two to each other. So for this October month, we can now compare the month of October's value to its last month to see the growth rate of that month for this client. And then depending on the context that you have in the page, if you just have just month and year, now it will be summarized to a better growth rate at the month and year level, as opposed to a more granular client level. And I'll show you how to put those on a visual real quick after this sample too, right? So the way that we can make this visual really quick is we can add a growth rate. So again, sticking in the time intelligence measures, we can do a growth rate metric here. So we're going to do a month over month order growth. And we're going to take a division, and we're going to go by our count of orders in the current date context minus the last month context, and then our divide function, takes our numerator, then our denominator. So our numerator is going to be our difference between current to last month, and then we're going to be dividing by our last month count, so we get a growth rate on that month. So again, go ahead and format this so it's easier to read. There you go. And now you have a quick growth rate, right? So now you've got a growth rate for your monthly activity for a client. It's that simple to do that in Power BI. And then a quick way to kind of show this as a visual is, let's go ahead and throw in a column chart. Wonderful. And then let's go to month and year. Great. And so there you go. So now you have your month over month growth for your entire company based on the month, right? That easy. And then let's say you want to drill down into it. We can add a company name. What is it? Client name. You can add a client name underneath here. And then now you can see each month's company's individual growth rate. And there are better ways of sampling this. Don't worry, I'll have a video on that later down the road, but just as a quick sample, just showing you the power of how quickly you can show those measures. It's that quick, right? All right, so let's move on to one other good example I wanted to show you guys here today. Let's go back to this matrix visual here. All right, so let me go with another group. This one is the third group that I will always add, calculated key measures. So again, this is a very high-level overview. There's a lot more in-depth that we can go on measures, but I just want to give you guys the basics for very, very basics of Power BI's DAX, of how powerful it can be. So you want to go into the more advanced stuff, then we'll have those videos soon. All right, so what we want to start out with is, let's say we want to know how many orders our clients are making on average daily. So our average daily orders. So what we're going to want to do here is, if we type in average, you can see that we get three options, right? So if we go with an average, we're just putting in a column name. So when we take the average of a column name, that's not going to get us what we want. But what we do want to do is we want to use this average x value, or average x function. What this is going to do is this is going to give us our average over our average of an expression over a table. So what we're going to do here is we're going to specify the table that we're taking an average on. We want to do it on a daily table. So what we're going to do is take the values of our date table. Values creates a unique table of all of the values within the column specified. So we're taking a unique value within our date table to give our average x function a date table of unique values. And then we're taking our expression being the, what are we calculating? Being the order count. Right, so what this is doing is we're taking the average count of our orders over the date table. And since we're specifying the date table to be a day, each date is unique. And so if we put this onto the page, what this is going to show us is that now each client, on average, our whole company is processing 2,700 orders a day on average. However, since we have client context on here, we can see that each client and their daily average. So this client has an average of 2 orders per day. However, this client has an average of 57 orders per day. So you can quickly, again, just how quickly you can see just those massive differences of clients that are ordering more frequently on a daily average. Very insightful numbers that you can get just very quickly. And another great one that I love to do with the average X function is not just by day, but average month and year. And again, going back to this date table that we've got just being so powerful has all of these columns already. So an average monthly orders as opposed to daily, and there you go. Now again, we're averaging 8,200 orders per month as opposed to each client averaging this number, right? So again, just how quick and simple you can find these insights. It's incredible with Power BI. And then one last couple of functions we'll go through is, again, using the calculate function. So calculate within DAX, I think, is the most powerful function you're ever going to use in DAX. It just starts to get a little more advanced. So I wanted to include something in here on calculate just because you're going to use it. Calculate is used all the time within Power BI. You're going to use it. I wanted to show something on it, but it requires somewhat of an understanding about what you're doing in order to understand how calculate is working. So what we're going to start with is a count of orders whose dollar value is over $1,000. Right, so now what we're going to want to do is we're going to calculate our count of orders. So again, going back to using that base measure, we're continuing to calculate on top of our base. And then what we're going to add on top of here is, instead of date add, we're going to add that filter statement. And then what we're going to filter is our orders table. So we're filtering our orders statement, or we're filtering our order expression by our orders table so that all orders are over $1,000. So what this is doing, we are calculating our count of orders where our total cost is over 1,000 by filtering our order table. And let's go ahead and throw these two guys off, throw the count of orders on, and then throw this under you. And then underneath here, so we can go down to the individual order level. Let's go into order ID as well, so we can drill down a bit. All right, so now what we can see is what this is now doing is, this is, again, this first column is showing us that count of orders, so all orders within the system for these individuals or for these clients. But then this new measure, what we've done is we've added a filter on there to only show us the orders that are over 1,000. So if we open up here our matrix table, we will see those orders, and let me do this actually, and let's do total order cost. There we go. So now what we've got is we've got the client with their order and then all of the counts, and then here we're doing the filtering on the cost. So again, we're filtering our count of order measure by our other measure. Again, just super quick, super easy how powerful Power BI is that you can just do that. Just like that, we have two measures, and then we create another measure that's just giving us a very insightful number. So again, just the power of that calculate function. And so once you've got all of these very basic functions, let me show you how you can just kind of throw some stuff on the page, and you can quickly kind of get some visuals going here to display a compelling report. Right, so let's go with the year and month. Let's go with the number of orders. And let's go with the type of order. What is it? Description. Type of order. Sure, let's go with that. Let's go with year slicer. Let's throw you as the line. Let's do category as a donut here. And let's show client name with, let's go count of orders over 1,000. And average order cost. Actually, let's do dailies. Let's do daily and monthly. I think that's probably better. Average daily. So here you go, right? Just like that. So within 20 minutes, we had no model. We created some measures, very, very basic measures, no knowledge of DAX needed, just some simple calculates with some functions or some adds and averages, very, very basic stuff, and then throw it on the page, and then you can make it look nice and pretty very quickly. And then just filtering on things, everything will filter each other with the power of BI. That is literally the power in Power BI. Just click on anything and all of your other numbers will filter. It's beautiful, you know, just like that. It was so easy, quick and easy. Just that's how it's done. All right, so ask some questions about DAX. We can go super in depth about this stuff. I get excited about this stuff, so let me know where you guys are hitting a wall in your guys' DAX, day-to-day DAX that you need some help with. We can get some examples going specific to that. But I hope you guys found this helpful. Again, don't be daunted by DAX. It's very, very easy, especially if you come from Excel. You can pick it up very quickly. Ask some questions if you have any, and I'll be back next time for another video. Thanks, guys. Hope you enjoyed it and hope it was helpful. Thanks for watching.